All right, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Time Out with Doc and Caveman. As always, you are here with Dr. Fantasy and the Fantasy Caveman. We are continuing to roll along with our NBA team previews. We are going to be focusing on the Golden State Warriors in this episode. Before we get rolling, make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We've been getting lots more momentum, lots more subscribers. Make sure you guys keep that momentum rolling. We appreciate the support, and we'll keep pushing out great content. We have lots of teams to cover still, and got some plans that we're working on for some new content and some new content in season and off season as well. So keep an eye out for that. Make sure you subscribe, and you'll get notified when that new content comes out. But let's continue here with the Golden State Warriors. Going back to last season, they were 39 and 33, which was ninth in the Western Conference under Steve Kerr. A few random stats. They were 12th in points per game. They had the 20th offensive rating and the fifth best defensive rating, which I think went kind of under the radar last season. Other random numbers, they had the ninth highest three-point percentage. They were towards the bottom in the league in rebounding, 20th in that department. Top 10 in three-point defense. And this is kind of interesting. They had the lowest two-point field goal percentage in the league offensively. So they did not shoot very well in the paint and from inside the three-point line. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then some of their season leaders from last season, Steph Curry led the way with 32 points per game, Andrew Wiggins at 18.6, and Kelly Oubre at 15.4. Rebounds, Draymond Green at 7.1, Marquise Chris at 6.5, and Kelly Oubre at 6. Assists, Draymond 8.9, Steph Curry at 5.8. And then steals, Draymond 1.7. I feel like Russell Westbrook again, and Steph Curry at 1.2. And then blocks, we have Wiggins and Chris at 1. I believe that's it. So, Caveman, who impressed you from this Warriors disappointing season?
Yeah, I mean, not disappointing. I mean, they finished. They did get a chance to at least compete in the postseason.
Yep.
They ultimately fell short, but I mean, you're gonna talk about other guys. I'm gonna talk about Steph Curry.
You would do that.
So let me just reel off a couple things about what Steph Curry did last season. You obviously mentioned his 32 points per game that led the NBA. Oldest to win the scoring title since Michael Jordan. 38. He had 38 30-point games, most since Michael Jordan. He had 337 threes last year, led the league. This was his fourth season of 300-plus made three-pointers, most in NBA history. He had 7 games of 10-plus three-pointers, most in NBA history. You kind of get it. You kind of sense a theme here. 7 games of 10-plus three-pointers, most in NBA history. And he also broke the Warriors' all-time scoring record. Bottom line is Steph Curry did Steph Curry things, and in my opinion, he was robbed of the MVP. Not to take anything away from Jokic. Jokic had an MVP caliber season. But if you take Steph Curry off of last year's Warriors team, how bad is Golden State? Think about that.
The worst team in the league, potentially.
Probably. Now, not to take much away from Jokic, but if you take Jokic off Denver, is Denver the worst team in the league? I don't think so, to be honest. Steph Curry, Steph Curry misses his running mate in Klay Thompson. I honestly, there's really no other words. I just listed off his accomplishments just to talk about how great Steph Curry is for a second and how he continued to do great things last season without much of a supporting cast. I mean, Kelly Oubre was a disappointment last season, at least offensively. His defense was still there, but Andrew Wiggins really didn't. I mean, Andrew Wiggins showed up late in the season a little bit, and But overall, I didn't like what I saw from Andrew Wiggins. James Wiseman, a little underwhelming to me. But Steph Curry was the big constant for them last season. As I said, he did what Steph Curry does, and that is be amazing at everything he does.
I mean, not everything. He's a great scorer. He's a great leader. He's a great teammate, but he still doesn't play great defense. So let's not get wild here. But I mean, but you did mention, or I mentioned before when we first started, that their defensive rating was top 5 in the league, which went very under the radar. I do think Andrew Wiggins impressed me on that end. I think people still expect more from him offensively. I mean, this is a guy coming into the league people thought was going to be the next superstar and could be one of the faces of the entire league. So, of course, he's never developed into that. But I think at this point in his career, he's become, I don't want to say he's not an elite defender yet, but he's above average, where he's been kind of average or below average most of his career. So I thought that was a really encouraging sign
Yeah.
last year. Sure, maybe he's not going to
Yeah,
be a 25 point
That's
a
what
game.
That's what I was like. I was like Wiggins. I mean, and Wiggins is younger. I mean, we talked about this when we talked about Wiggins before. Like he's not like Wiggins feel like he's been in the league forever, but he's still not even 30 years old yet.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Wiggins was there defensively. I think he didn't. He did his thing. He was a big part of the reason why the Warriors were so good defensively. And I do want to mention, I mean, you mentioned that with the leaders. I mean, Draymond did what Draymond does. Draymond is he kind of proved again last season that he's kind of their, I mean, Steph Curry is their leader and their leading offensive force, but Draymond Green continues to be their kind of like glue that holds everything together. And that certainly didn't change last season, even with so many new pieces and everything moving around it. Draymond, and I can see Draymond is the perfect fit with Golden State. Now, the interesting thing with Draymond, and I want to ask you this, is Draymond a pure system player? Meaning, if Draymond Green were to go to some other team, would he be this good?
I mean, I think that he still would carve out a role. To this level, I don't know. That's tough to say. I don't think that he's a complete system player. I mean, he's a great playmaker. He's a great rebounder. He's one of those guys that he's got that kind of attitude and energy that I personally like, and he's the kind of guy that I would build a team around. Just give me him and Marcus Smart, and I think I'd be happy for the rest of my life.
You imagine him? You imagine that would be the best. You put him and Marcus Smart. Let's just theoretically put him and Marcus Smart on Miami with Jimmy Butler. That's the best defensive team to ever live.
That would just make my entire life complete. But I mean, I think the only thing that would change maybe substantially would be his playmaking ability, because he's always had so many shooters around him.
Yeah.
So I still think he'd be a high level defender, a great rebounder. I mean, he's not a great scorer. He never has been. But I mean, he averaged 8.9 assists, which was actually a career high last season. So they've always surrounded him with shooters. I think that's the biggest part of his game. As much as he'd still be a facilitator, he wouldn't have the opportunity to flash as much because he wouldn't have as much offensive talent around him.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I mean, so guys that stood out for me. By the way, I think it's wild still that 4 of the top 5 seasons in terms of making 3-pointers all belong to Steph Curry. He's 1, 3, 4, and 5. So it's just
I know, right?
It's bizarre.
I mean,
James Harden sliding in there in second too.
I mean,
but
anybody that says Steph Curry isn't the greatest, I think he's unquestionably the greatest shooter, greatest shooter of all time, and I don't think it's close.
Yeah, didn't even Reggie Miller say that recently, or was it Ray Allen? One of them, I think, recently actually came out and said that, and I'm like, all right, if they're saying that,
you can't, don't even try and play devil's advocate or anything. Like, you can't. Steph Curry is unquestionably the greatest shooter to ever live.
Yeah, nope, I think that's fair. So, I mean, the thing with the Warriors for me is even when Draymond, like you said, he did Draymond things. Like, did he necessarily stand out or do anything we weren't expecting? Not really. I mean, Kelly Oubre was disappointing. I think people expected a lot more out of him. It was very well noted how slowly he started off this season. He couldn't hit a three-pointer if it knocked him in the face. Um, but besides that, I mean, there wasn't many guys that stood out. The only one that I'll make a note of, who he got more minutes based off of Klay being out last season, was Jordan Poole, was actually pretty good. So he ended up only starting 7 games for him, but he played in over 50 games for him, averaged 12 points. All of his percentages went up: 88 free throw percentage, 35% from three, which isn't great, but it's much improved from where he was his rookie season. His field goal percentage went up 10%. So I think that's big for them because they're going to be looking for guys that can play valuable minutes off of the bench. And I think Jordan Poole is going to end up being their point guard and facilitator and not their main scoring option, but I think he's going to play a really big role off the bench. So I think him getting a lot of valuable minutes last year was a really positive thing for them. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting too is he actually had the 97th highest player efficiency rating in the NBA. And I know that doesn't seem impressive, but you're talking that means he's the top 4 player. You know, if each team gets 4 players in the top 120, if you divide it up evenly, he's number 97. So I actually think that's pretty impressive for a role player such as himself. So I think if anyone stood out to me in terms of these younger guys that aren't one of the, I don't want to say big four with Wiggins, Oubre, Curry, and Draymond, but those were their 4 best players last season by name. So I think the only one that really made a difference to me was Jordan Poole, and I think he's carved himself out a nice role this season.
Toscano Anderson kind of did some decent things off the bench too, I think, but nothing that was like overly impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would agree with that. And Jordan Poole is 22 years old, so he's still got some time to develop as well. So we'll see if he's able to carve a nice role off the bench. And this is going to be a team that's very deep moving forward. So let's look at what they did this offseason then. Through the draft, which was very notable for them, they had 2 top 15 picks. 7th overall, they took Jonathan Kuminga. 14th overall, Moses Moody, which was a nice pick there for him. And then through free agency and the trade market, they got Belika, big man, Chris Chioza, Andre Iguodala, and Otto Porter. And they lost Kent Bazemore, Kelly Oubre, and Eric Pascal. So, what do you think of this offseason for them?
Oh man, this was a great offseason. And we talked about it on draft night. This was probably one of the best picks. I mean, in terms of the Moses Moody pick, a perfect fit for this Golden State Warriors team. Him and Jordan Poole are going to be pretty much the two key guards off the bench for him. So Moody is going to have a role from day one. Kuminga, on the other hand, I mean, I like the pick in Kuminga more because they also got Moody. Because now Kuminga is a bit more of a project. He is like a twig. He's gonna have to add some strength and some weight, but he definitely has potential if he can also continue to develop his jump shot a little bit. I think he could be a very key piece for this team in years to come. But he's not. I don't expect Kuminga to be much of a factor from day one. Certainly not as much as I expect Moody to be. But yeah, I mean, and I don't think it also I don't think it could be understated how much the Andre Iguodala signing means to this team. Because now you look at this team with hopefully Klay coming back. I know it's a bit of up in the air when exactly Klay is going to be back, but he is expected to be back at some point this upcoming season. You have him and Steph back with Draymond, with Iguodala. This this is starting to look like it with some solid depth as well, as we'll talk about when we get into their depth chart. This has some very eerie similarities to those Warriors championship teams. So I'm loving this offseason and what they did. Otto Porter was another like low risk, high reward signing. Bjelica is a solid, basically. Bjelica's basically replacing Pascal. So overall, great offseason. I really think it's clear what the Warriors are trying to do here.
Yeah, and I like their draft. When we did the Kuminga prospect profile, I said if he ends up in Golden State that he's going to end up being a superstar, and I stand by that. I'm telling you right now, it has all the Kawhi vibes in the world when the Spurs took him. I mean, that's exactly what this was. Kawhi was very raw coming out of San Diego State, and he got to kind of sit on the bench.
You're saying Kuminga's going to be Kawhi.
I think that he could be. Yep, honestly. I'll go that far as I'm not going to say he is going to be, but would I be surprised? I wouldn't be. I think that he needed to be in the right system under the right coaching, and I think he finds himself in the perfect opportunity. Absolutely no pressure on him. He can learn from Steph, learn from Klay Thompson, learn from Draymond, learn from these veterans that have won multiple championships. And I think the combination of Kuminga and James Wiseman could potentially reset this dynasty in the future. And I think that's why their draft was so perfect. You have Kuminga, who sets them up for the future, but they also got Moses Moody, who can contribute now. And I think they're in a point with their depth chart where I don't think they needed two guys that can contribute now. And I know that sounds a little wild, but I think they could afford to take the chance on a guy like Kuminga. Because if he doesn't pan out, for being honest, they're still going to be fine this season and for the next few seasons.
They still got Moses Moody.
Yeah, exactly. So Kuminga is only 18 years old. I mean, Kawhi really didn't make an impact his first 3 years. So at that track, maybe Kuminga makes a huge impact when he's 21, 22. That's fine at this point.
And also another reason to love that Andre Iguodala is a great mentor.
Yeah.
That might have been the hidden number one reason why they went out and got Iguodala is to help mentor Kuminga.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I really like Iguodala. You mentioned Otto Porter as well, who's going to provide just more depth defensively for them. Bjelica is more of a modern big man, so he's not going to provide much down in the post. He's going to be more of a guy that stretches the floor for him, and I think you're going to see him play small ball, similar to what they did last season. I don't know what their plans are with Wiseman, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit when we go through their depth chart. And we'd be silly if we didn't talk about James Wiseman a little bit. But yeah, I think it was an off season that it's not a sexy one when you look at their additions, but they made just very, very smart moves to continue. They're defensively, they're not going to be any worse, and I think they did need to address that with losing Oubre, who was very, very nice defensively last season for him.
They're getting Klay Thompson back at some point.
Whenever, yeah, the combination of getting Klay back, having Otto Porter, Iguodala, that more than makes up for that loss. So I think they did a good job putting this offseason together without making any big splashes. So let's go through their depth chart. I'm going to say as of right now, we mentioned we don't know when Klay Thompson's going to be back, but obviously when he comes back, he's going to slot right into that starting lineup in the backcourt with Steph Curry.
You don't think they're going to bring him off the bench?
I think that would be a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. Behind those two in the backcourt, I mentioned Jordan Poole already. Moses Moody, Andre Iguodala, and Damian Lee will be their other guards coming off of the bench. At the 3 right now, they have Andrew Wiggins listed with Otto Porter, Kuminga, and Toscano Anderson backing him up. Draymond and Wiseman in the front court. I'm not 100% sure. We'll see if Wiseman ends up starting for him, but he'll be at least playing some significant minutes for them. Then behind them, Otto Porter will probably play the 4 a little bit too, but Bjelica and then Kevon Looney coming off the bench playing the 4 and 5 as well. So as a whole, you kind of alluded to it already, but what do you think about this depth chart as a whole?
I honestly, I love this depth chart, and we're talking about, and man, they're deep everywhere. They got a ton of. they have a deep backcourt behind Steph. I think it's going to allow them. I mean, Steph's still going to be heavily relied on, as he should be. But I think their depth is going to allow Steph to not play 40-plus minutes a game like he basically had to last season. I think they're gonna be able to at least ease the load on a night-to-night basis. And then the front court. I mean, you behind Wiggins, Draymond. I mean, but whether it's Wiseman starting or Bjelica or Kevon Looney, I mean, they got plenty. In my opinion, they got plenty of depth in the front court. Toscano Anderson can play some 4. Otto Porter can play some 4. Honestly, there's no holes in this depth chart, so I love it.
Yeah, I don't see much either, if we're being honest about it. I mean, now if Curry went down, I mean, how confident are you that
Steph Curry? I'm sorry. I don't care how much depth that you have. If Steph Curry comes down, you're toast no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say that they would be complete toast, but I think that Jordan Poole still has a lot to prove. He improved last season. We're still counting on him to be a lead guard on the second unit. So either way, I think he's still going to have to show more, because the reality is he was a good guard on a borderline playoff team, but can he be a lead guard leading a second unit? I still think he has to answer that question. So I think he's got a lot to prove. That's the only question mark you could potentially even point to. I don't know if I call it a huge.
Even at that point, we're basically nitpicking at that point.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But I like the way that they're constructed when you look at it. They have great 3-point shooting. They were a top 5 defensive team last year. There's no reason they can't be that again. They have veterans. They have youth. They have a kind of a great head coach. They have a mix of everything that you need to be a championship level team. So, yeah, let's talk about James Wiseman a little bit, because we'd be crazy if we didn't bring that up in this episode before we get to the predictions. I think it's an interesting year for James Wiseman.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me, and we talked about this in previous lives in the Fantasy Hotspot, about how every trade scenario this offseason included James Wiseman. And to me, it was still bizarre. I mean, the guy is 20 years old. He's not even close to hitting the peak of his development. There were times that were very concerning where he looked lost offensively and defensively, which I think disappointed people, just because there's a lot of expectations for him to be a great defender year one, but there's a big learning curve for him. I'm not worried about him. I still think he has all the talent in the world. You have to remember that he didn't even really play his only season at Memphis, so he hasn't played against a high level of competition.
Like 3 games.
And then he opted out. So it's been a while since he's played high level organized basketball. So I'm going to be interested to see what his development looks like. This is a team that wants to win now, so I don't believe that he's going to be starting to start the season. You saw how conservative Steve Kerr was with him this year. I think he's going to continue to be that way with him, because I think they want to win. And if they want to win now, Looney and Bjelica are probably better options at this point that'll provide them better minutes.
One way, I really think. I do think from game 1 that Wiseman's probably coming off the bench, but I definitely think Wiseman can earn his spot back in that starting unit, because I mean, Bjelica and Looney are solid players, but none of them have anywhere close to the upside that Wiseman has.
Mm-hmm.
Wiseman has once in a generation type potential and ability. So if Wiseman can get it together, which he still can, he's 20 years old. He didn't play a ton last season. So you look at his only significant run in the past 2 seasons was and last season was a weird season too. That has to factor into it. So I think Wiseman long term will be fine. I'm not too concerned about as long as a lot of people didn't like how Steve Kerr handled Wiseman last season, but I like how Steve Kerr handled Wiseman, and I think he was justified based on how we saw Wiseman play on the court. I think initially off the bat, I hope Steve Kerr keeps up the same way he was doing it last season. And if Wiseman improves, Wiseman's going to see that starting lineup.
Yeah, I think Steve Kerr proved that he's not going to just hand it to Wiseman. Wiseman's going to have to continually improve and show that he can make a splash here in Golden State. So nothing's going to be handed to him no matter how high he was picked. So let's go looking to next season. You'll probably want to go second, so sure, I can talk about the wonderful Warriors first. But I mean, the reality is you'll have a bold prediction. I don't think it's crazy at all. But I mean, I think this is a team that I would probably slot them in as the 4 seed right now for me personally. And that's going to be slightly dependent on how many games Klay plays because he's going to have a huge impact.
Entirely dependent on how. I mean, the seeding at least is going to depend on what time.
Without Klay Thompson, probably a 6 or 7 seed, but with a healthy full squad, I'd have him as the 4 seed in the Western Conference right now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, their seeding is going to be entirely dependent on how much Klay comes. About when Klay Thompson comes back, how long it takes them. I mean, I don't think the Warriors are getting much time for Klay Thompson to get integrated back into things. I mean, this is the same system that they've been running for a while now. Just a couple of new pieces to integrate, but don't think it's going to take a ton of time for them to kind of get back into things once Klay comes back. So let's just say hypothetically, I don't think he'll be ready for the start of the season. Let's say hypothetically, Klay Thompson was there game 1. I honestly can see them as the 3 seed, 2 or 3, honestly. In the mix with the LA teams, I think that's their ceiling. But realistically, I would pick them somewhere between 4 and 6. But that's really not indicative of their chances, which I'm just gonna say I think they can make the finals. And I know you said it wasn't crazy, but if you think about it, this has all the makings of the Warriors teams that won championships.
Not the Durant version.
Not the Durant version, but they won. People forget they won titles before Durant.
They did, yeah.
So this has all the makings of those that Warriors mold. They have all the elements. They have Iguodala back. They have the Splash Brothers. They have youth. They have depth. And when people talk about it being a slam dunk that the Lakers and Nets are going to meet in the finals, what's the one thing everybody loves about the Lakers right now? They have depth. They've been signing guys like crazy, and they have but they have really good depth. You look at the Warriors, they have a lot of depth as well. I don't think you can sleep on the depth that Golden State has right now. When you look up and down, I think the Warriors are gonna go. They're gonna go at least 10 deep every night. They're gonna have a lot of guys that are gonna be able to contribute for them. So I would not be shocked if they made a run at the finals, and I'd be shocked if I did not predict that the Warriors are gonna make the finals. So that's kind of.
Now, my biggest concern, I'll say, with that is we have to. Now, one of their biggest weaknesses last season, and I think we didn't really talk about it, and I think you kind of have to bring it up a little bit, but they weren't very efficient offensively. The entire offensive load was on Steph Curry. So if Klay Thompson isn't healthy for a big chunk of the season, how differently, realistically, does this Warriors team look? So you add a rookie in Moses Moody, and you and I both like Moses Moody, but he is a rookie. Kuminga, rookie. So is this team actually any better offensively without Klay Thompson, or does a lot of this ride on Klay Thompson? I think that's a reality, and we don't know how he's going to come back. No one, and we can sit here and say, I think he's going to come back full of strength. But the reality is nobody knows how he's going to come back. Should he be fine coming off that injury? He should be, but there's guys that react differently and recover differently from injuries. So the reality is Klay Thompson's just that important to this puzzle piece, because if not, we could see a situation like last year unless a guy like Moody or Wiggins takes a huge step forward that we're not expecting. The entire offensive loan
we're talking,
cannot be on Curry.
I think even with they need Klay Thompson to have. They need at least Klay Thompson to be, I would say, at least 80% of what he was pre-injury for them to have championship hopes. But they're still a playoff team, regardless of having without Klay Thompson. But if they're gonna win the title, of course they need Klay Thompson to be most of what Klay Thompson was, and that's, I mean, there's no way around that. But I do think with Klay, I do think they're gonna be more efficient offensively. I don't think that's gonna be a question. Steph, I hope Steph doesn't have to lead the league in scoring again. I don't think that's gonna work for playoff success. Because you got teams that you need. While Steph Curry can do great things, as you mentioned, it's not, their efficiency is not going to be good if Steph Curry has to chuck up 35 shots a game. Because he needs Klay Thompson for them to take that next step.
Yeah, but I think that's a reality, and I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like this has been way too positive. But the reality is that
positivity.
Nope, that's the reality though. Is they had a lot of struggles offensively last year, and I feel like we didn't highlight that enough. So I think it's at least worth.
Offensively.
Well, they did as a unit, so 20th in efficiency is not ideal. But yeah, I mean, under Steve Kerr, they've always, and that's always been the underrated part of these Warriors title runs, is that their defense has been a top 10 unit every year that they won the championship. People want to talk about Klay chucking up threes and Durant and Klay Thompson, but the reality is those teams were great defensively, and that's why I do think they still have the makings of a team that can make it all the way as long as they solve the puzzle offensively. That's kind of the key here.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for the Warriors. It'll be a fun season for them. We've mentioned in every episode, but this is going to be fun monitoring the playoff picture throughout the entire season. There's a lot of competitive teams, a lot of people that are going to be fighting for it, especially with the play-in games now. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. We have lots of great previews and some more content coming up in the next few weeks. So keep an eye out on that, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.